My name is Agent Thorne. I worked for 30 years at the Treasury Department, firmly believing I was protecting America's economic power. But in reality, I was just a watchdog guarding the vault while the real owners of the country counted their gold. When I found out who they were, they erased me from the system, but they couldn't erase my memory. And today, I'm sharing it with you. Have you ever wondered where a country really begins? Not with loud declarations and signed charters. No. It begins with one question. Who's going to pay the bills? I remember the first time I came across the Prometheus file. It was tucked away in the farthest corner of the archive, covered in a finger-thick layer of dust. It was a dossier on the birth of our financial system, and it didn't smell like old paper. It smelled like fear and deceit. We won our freedom from the British Crown, but freedom is expensive. We had no factories, no technology. London forbade us from developing it. We were a nation of farmers and soldiers, broke and desperate. We desperately needed money, our own system, so that the lifeblood could flow through the veins of a young economy. And then, in 1781, the first player appeared, the Bank of North America. Sounds solid, right? It was supposed to be our financial heart. But it failed. Why? Because people back then trusted not paper promises, but what they could hold, the jingle of gold or silver coins. A bank printing paper money seemed like a trick, an illusion, but backstage, another player was waiting, someone who understood the power of these illusions. His name was Nathan Rothschild. From his London office, he looked at our young nation, not as a symbol of freedom, but as the most promising asset in the world. He needed his man in America, and he found him, Alexander Hamilton, brilliant, ambitious, and as I realized from those documents, tragically naive. Through him, Rothschild pushed the idea of a new bank, a stronger one, the first bank of the United States. It started lending money to our government. You know what happens when you start printing money backed by nothing but debt? That's right, prices soar. Within 5 years, inflation ate up almost everything, 70%. People grew poorer, and a handful close to the bank grew richer. In 1811, we came to our senses. Congress declined to renew that monster's charter. We thought we'd won. But that was just the first battle. They never leave for good. They just retreat into the shadows, to strike again. They didn't wait long. After the War of 1812, when the country was in debt again, they returned. The name was new, the Second Bank of the United States. But the game was the same Hydra, just with a new head. And it started choking the country again. But this time, one man stood in their way, a man they couldn't buy or intimidate. His portrait is on the $20 bill, and the irony still makes me smirk. Andrew Jackson. Old Hickory. A war hero, a man of the people who despised elites and their financial games. When Jackson took office in 1828, he declared war on the bank. I've read transcripts of his speeches. Every word was soaked in fury. He called the bank a hydra of corruption and a nest of vipers. He saw how it manipulated the economy, ruined farmers, and enriched its owners. In 1833, he struck a crushing blow. He ordered all government funds withdrawn from the bank. Can you imagine the panic in the bankers' offices? They decided to teach the president a lesson, to teach the whole country. They triggered a credit crisis, stopped issuing loans, and demanded existing ones repaid. They thought economic collapse would force Jackson to back down. The Depression began. People lost everything. Jackson faced impeachment threats. Enemies surrounded him. But he stood firm. He looked them in the eye and said, "You're a den of thieves. I will destroy you, and by the eternal God, I will destroy you." And he did. The bank's charter was not renewed, a quarter of a century. Just think about that. 25 years America lived and prospered without a central bank. The economy ran on real money, gold and silver. It was our golden age of financial freedom. But history teaches one thing. Any freedom is just a temporary truce between battles. And the bloodiest battle was still ahead. War. Always the perfect cover. When a nation is divided, brother fights brother. People stop paying attention to what's really happening to their money. Abraham Lincoln understood this. During the Civil War, He needed to finance the Union Army but didn't want to fall into debt bondage to international bankers charging usury. So he did the unthinkable. He, in effect, circumvented them. He ordered the Treasury to print its own money, debt-free. They called it greenbacks. It was a brilliant and deadly move. Lincoln proved that a government can create money for its people's needs without middlemen. For private banks, it was a death sentence. Their main income, interest on government debt, was threatened. Then, a shot rang out. Lincoln was gone, and almost immediately after his death, the greenbacks began to be withdrawn. Coincidence? In my investigations, I learned not to believe in coincidences when big money and power are involved. I saw a report on President James Garfield's death in 1881. Weeks before he was killed, he said prophetically, "Whoever controls the money supply of any country controls the entire industry and commerce." He wanted to expose it. They didn't let him. Then came William McKinley. He won election on a platform of honest money based on gold and started an antitrust investigation against the financial giant of the time, J.P. Morgan. In 1901, right after his re-election, McKinley was assassinated. The investigation, of course, was shut down. See the pattern? 3 presidents, 3 attempts to challenge the power of those who print money, 3 bullets. They realized killing presidents was too dirty, too risky. They had to create a system, eternal, unshakable, protected by law, so no president, no hero, could ever stand in their way again. And they found the perfect place to plan their final decisive strike. Jekyll Island, 1910. Today, it's a resort. Back then, a secluded private club for the richest people in America. Picture this, late autumn. A private rail car arrives from the mainland, windows tightly curtained. Out step men whose names were synonymous with power: Rockefeller, Morgan, Warburg representatives. The most powerful bankers in the world gathered in complete secrecy. Their goal, to draft a bill handing control of America's money supply into their private hands forever. For 10 days, they worked in secret, crafting their plans' details. They knew the country would never accept the Morgan or Rockefeller Central Bank. The name had to be different. It had to sound governmental, patriotic. And they came up with a brilliant name: the Federal Reserve System. Federal, though it has nothing to do with the federal government. It's a private corporation owned by private banks. Yes, there is some government oversight, but less than 50%. Reserve, though it holds no real reserves. It creates money out of thin air just by making entries in ledger books. System, and this is true. It's a system designed to take risks off the banks and shift them onto taxpayers' shoulders. They waited for the perfect moment. Christmas, 1913. Most congressmen had gone home for the holidays. In a half-empty chamber, they rushed the Federal Reserve Act through, and President Woodrow Wilson, who later bitterly regretted it, signed it. That night, the most powerful entity in our history was born. An entity that answers to neither president nor Congress. It runs our economy, our lives, and it was conceived in darkness, on a secluded island, by a group of people whose only goal was absolute power. They built their fortress, and it seemed nothing could break it. But every fortress has its Achilles heel, and this one's was gold. Gold, that's what they feared. As long as the dollar was tied to gold, they couldn't print money uncontrollably. That was the chain holding the beast back. But in 1971, the chain was broken. President Nixon announced live on TV that the U.S. would no longer exchange dollars for gold. The official reason? Fighting speculators. The real reason, which I found in those documents, was simple. We were running out of gold. We had printed too much paper. That day, money died. And something else was born: debt. The dollar stopped being a gold receipt. It became a promise of future debt. From that moment, the Federal Reserve gained unlimited power. They could print as much as they wanted. What did they do? They slowly but surely dropped interest rates, making loans cheaper and cheaper. They hooked the nation on cheap debt. The consumer boom of the 80s and 90s, all fueled by this. But it was a one-way street. By 2008, rates hit 0. The system broke down, and the system, like in the 70s, went into a tailspin. Look where we are today. The average American family's debt exceeds their yearly income. We all live on credit. We work to pay interest to a private corporation, created 100 years ago on a secret island. After the Soviet Union collapsed in '91, the dollar became king of the world. But now its empire is crumbling. The world is tired. Some want to keep control of the printing press at any cost. Others bet on supranational institutions, and still others quietly buy gold, believing that only it can be the true measure of value when illusions fade. The dollar is coming home, shrinking to a regional currency. And the big question everyone has to ask themselves, what kind of America will they find? One built on a solid foundation, or a house of cards about to collapse? I've told you what I know. What you do with it is up to you.